What's up, guys? My name is Chimoge. This is Chimoge's Comments, and today I just wanted to say that The Dark Knight is overrated. That's right, the movie that people say is the best superhero movie of all time, one of the best of all time, I think is big time overrated. Let me explain. So, to start off, when I say it's overrated, I'm not saying it's not good, right? Because I would say The Dark Knight is a how do I want to say it? I say you could argue it's a good movie. That's what I'll say. You could argue it's a good movie. It's definitely an enjoyable movie. You could watch it, you can enjoy it because the acting's very good. Action scenes are very good. The like cinematography and all that's very good. Even though as we get farther and farther away from 2008, some of it starts to look a little old, but definitely at the time it was great, and even still now still good, right? And even I'm not a person who'll say that like just because like a movie looks old the cinematography isn't good, because even old movies that can kind of have a look to it, where it's still nice to watch, so it's good in that sense. But there are really three main reasons why I say The Dark Knight is overrated, right? So the first reason I think it's overrated is because it's Batman, and Batman is kind of whack. All right. Now, again, similar to the Dark Knight, when I say that Batman's whack, I'm not saying that he's not enjoyable, right? I watched some Batman growing up. Even as I got older, probably like a few years ago, I was actually binge watching the '90s Batman cartoon. Good stuff. It's very enjoyable. But when you look at the character of Batman, it doesn't make any sense and it's ethically questionable. So let's break it down, right? You have this wealthy white billionaire who's basically the richest man in the world. I think in some stories, either he's one of the richest, maybe they say he's the richest. Most of the ones I've seen, they say he's the richest, right? He lives in a city filled with crime and violence. And instead of using his wealth and political influence to get rid of that crime and violence, he dresses up like a bat and beats up criminals with his bare hands. That doesn't make any sense. That just does not make any sense, straight up, right? And then it's questionable ethically because it's like, well, because first of all, what the character is doing is, I'll just go ahead and say it's not good at all. Okay, in the story of Batman, they do all this gymnastics to make it justified within the world. Like, oh, if Bruce Wayne doesn't go out every night in his suit and beat up common criminals, everything will crumble. But that's just a crazy scenario. That's a crazy scenario. It doesn't resemble real life at all, right? So because of that, if you were to take that scenario and put it into real life, that's just evil, really. Okay, if a billionaire is going around beating up common criminals, chasing after people who stole from the jewelry shop, instead of like addressing the reason why they might want to steal in the first place, doesn't make any sense, right? So you don't behave like that. You just don't behave like that in real life, right? And then on top of that, the way it portrays the criminals in Batman are just like these mindless evil people, right? They none of them have like really understandable motives. So, sure, they'll show like maybe childhood trauma or relationship trauma for some of them, but that's not what leads most people to become uh criminals. Even the concept of a criminal is a little questionable, right? Like, if you break an unjust law, are you a criminal? Right? If you break a law that might make sense but you do it because, say, maybe you steal because your society's deprived you of food, are you a criminal? Or if you are a criminal, does that really mean anything? Are you any more criminal than the people running your society? Doesn't make sense. But anyway, right? Most people who become criminals don't do it just because of trauma. They do it because of um like, at least there's an element of need there. Like, they live in a community that's been deprived, where there's a lot of temptation around them, right? And that maybe they don't have money, and then on top of that, there's been a lot of violent organizations that have been allowed to run riot in that community, in some cases intentionally set up in that community. So when you're under pressure, there's just a lot of temptation to fall into that, and a lot of cases need, right? You might need to do something criminal to feed your family or yourself, right? And that's not to say that there isn't also personal responsibility. It's a both and, but all Batman shows is the personal responsibility and not the like societal uh deprivation, society destroying your community, making you have to do that. Right? So it's just questionable that Batman goes around doing that instead of using his wealth and political influence to solve the problem in a more sensible way. And in Batman, you see, he never solves the problem. The plot always makes it such that, oh, this is the best possible outcome, but the criminals always keep coming. And that's another thing. 99% of criminals aren't just going to do the crime no matter what. Most people, if someone like Batman magically came out and punched you in the face every time you committed a crime, foiled your plans, you would just stop. You'd be like, all right, even if I'm going to be broke as a good person, I'm going to be a broke, law-abiding citizen instead of having this crazy billionaire. I mean, they don't know he's a billionaire, most of them, but whatever. This crazy dude in a bat suit beat me up every time I try and steal some jewels, right? So again, doesn't make sense, right? Then on top of that, when you look at Batman's personal, well, this is all personal conduct, but let's say his so-called personal life, right? Doesn't make sense either. This guy has all the money in the world, right? He could choose to do anything. Never starts a family, never even finds a stable romantic partner, doesn't have any friends. Like that's just an antisocial person, right? That's not a healthy person. And again, in the world of Batman, they justify it. Oh, if he didn't do this, he would put people at risk. The world would suffer. But again, that's a crazy scenario. That's like designing a world in which unicorns need to drink 7 Up for the sun to revolve. It doesn't make any sense. So then when people watch that, especially kids, because keep in mind, Batman, even though initially it was designed for adults, for most of its history until now is primarily targeted at kids. When kids watch that, um, they take in that mentality, they act that out subconsciously or consciously. They do nonsense in real life, right? And even adults, because that kind of shit can affect anyone. Even adults, when you act that out, will do bad things. So long story short, um Batman just doesn't make sense, does not make sense, just period doesn't make sense. Even if you want to go into his no deleting people rule, on the face it looks good, but he will literally do everything short of deleting people. Like, sure, I won't delete you intentionally, but I'll throw a car at you. Sure, I won't delete you, but I will beat you until you're unconscious. Like, it just no, it's still not good. So Batman doesn't make any sense, even though a lot of the stories with him are fun, and if you turn your brain off, you can enjoy it. If you turn your brain on, you're like, what am I watching? What am I watching? Right? So that's Batman one. And I know you could say, oh, you can't hurt the Dark Knight because of that, because that's just the source material. Well, if you adapt crappy source material exactly, then what you've created is still crap. Okay. So that just is what it is, right? One, Batman sucks. Two, the Dark Knight is part of a trilogy, right? So you can't just look at it in and of itself. You have to look at it in terms of the overall trilogy plot line and story. And in terms of that, it doesn't do a good job of continuing the trilogy, because the first movie, Batman Begins, while it's enjoyable, right, especially if you turn your brain off a bit, although there's some things even you just can't turn your brain off. Like, I know the scene Batman Begins where Bruce Wayne runs off to, I don't even know what he does after he sees the guy who deleted his parents get deleted. He runs off to explore the world and learn kung fu. He goes to Asia. He's running with a bunch of Asian, I guess, beggars who are robbing like a ship. And he gets like arrested with them or whatever, but then he's like, but I was never like them. And then it shows that he owned the ship they were robbing because it was a Wayne Enterprises ship. And I'm just like, so you think you're better than them because you own the stuff that these poor people were trying to steal to survive? If you're so good, why didn't you just give them your stuff? Like, what? Anyway, so he had crazy stuff like that in Batman Begins, but other stuff, just plot stuff that didn't make sense. Even he basically broke his no deletion rule, because I mean, Yeah, I didn't say this already, but in case you haven't noticed, this has spoilers for the whole. Well, I'm not gonna get into the Dark Knight Returns because or the Dark Knight Rises, sorry, because I won't need to. That's the movie after this. But this has I'm giving spoilers for Batman Begins and the Dark Knight. So sorry if you haven't seen those movies yet. But he breaks his kill rule basically, even though the movie tries to make it seem like he doesn't in Batman Begins, because after he's fighting Ra's al Ghul at the end, he's like, I don't have to, I won't delete you, but I don't have to save you. And then he jumps out of the way while a train that he set in motion um deletes Ra's al Ghul. So it's like, no, you did delete him. Doesn't make sense. So anyway, there's all that mess, but none of that gets resolved in the Dark Knight. And then there's just some characters missing from the Dark Knight that doesn't make sense. Like for example, well, first of all, like Ra's al Ghul's League of Shadows just is not there, and they do pop up again in the Dark Knight Rises. So it's like, why were they not? They just disappeared completely. Like that's usually not how things work. Sure, like an organization could go through a down period after you take out their leader, but to just completely fall off the map, especially an organized crime organization, seems kind of unrealistic. Then you have Scarecrow, another major villain who's not captured at the end of uh Batman Begins. It's just not in the movie at all. It's like, why would he not be there? Why the Joker never decided to team up with him? He never took the opportunity when the Joker was wreaking havoc to do anything. Even some of the like crime bosses that are shown in what you call it, Batman Begins, like Falcone, just not there. And it's like, why? It is not really well explained, right? So you got that, and then it just doesn't. A lot of the other character stuff from the Batman Begins just not resolved in uh what you call it, the Dark Knight. So it's just a bad continuation of the trilogy in terms of the plot and character development, right? And then the third reason, and probably the biggest reason I think that the Dark Knight is overrated, is again because of what I just said, plot and character development with a heavy emphasis on plot. The plot of the Dark Knight makes no sense. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, if you went inside the head of a goat, you wouldn't find a plot as stupid as that plot, right? Because the center of the plot is that because the Joker is there wreaking havoc, and everyone pays attention to the Joker, and they like Heath Ledger's performance. But the Joker is really like just he's really just glorified background noise, to be honest. Right? That's not the center of the plot. And okay, maybe I'm exaggerating. He does play like a big role in the plot, but he's like not. Honestly, I wouldn't even say that the Joker, arguably the Joker is not even the main villain. I think the main villain is despair in the Dark Knight, right? Because the center of the plot is that Harvey Dent, who becomes Two-Face, is the district attorney, the prosecutor, right? Who's helping to actually clean up crime in Gotham the legal way. And the reason he's so effective is because the public know he's a good person, or they think he's a good person. So then like criminals are just less likely to commit crime because I guess he can't be bribed, and then also his aura, and that's kind of the center of it. It's like criminals don't determine whether or not they commit crime based on how good of a person they think the prosecutor is. That just like let's just sit with that like for like 15 seconds. The Dark Knight wants us to believe that criminals will stop committing crime because they think that the district attorney is a good person. Let's sit with that for 15 seconds. Okay, 15 seconds up. That just it just doesn't make any sense. Just does not make any sense. And I think the reason that doesn't get pointed out more is because one, people love Batman. Two, so much other good stuff was going on in the movie. People just wanted to overlook it to have fun. And maybe three, I don't know. They say Americans don't get enough sleep. I guess people's brains are just not completely on when they're watching that. But it just does not make sense, right? But then secretly, Harvey Dent, who everyone thinks is a good guy, is actually a bad guy because he has an unjust violent streak. So then Batman and Commissioner Gordon try and keep that a secret so that it doesn't get out that he's a bad guy, so that crime doesn't increase. And it's just because the first instance we see he's a bad guy is when this is before he's officially Two Face. Him and Batman are trying to interrogate this criminal. So then Harvey Dent flips a coin and is like, "Oh, if it lands on tails, I'll delete you." And then Batman catches the coin and is like, "You would leave the life of this man up to chance." And it's a pretty dope line. But then I think there's someone else there, and it might have been Commissioner Gordon. I don't remember. But then Batman says to someone else after Harvey Dent kind of leaves or goes off and does something else. He's like, "No one else can know what happened here." So that's the first instance where like, all right, Harvey Dent has a screw loose. Then later, after he gets his face burned, and then he officially becomes Two Face. Then he tries to delete Batman and Commissioner Gordon's son, and then he fails and he ultimately passes away. And then Batman and Commissioner Gordon decide to cover it up so the public doesn't know that he was an attempted deleter, right? And even an official deleter, because up until that point, actually, Two Face had deleted several people, right, on a revenge quest because his fiance um, got deleted by the Joker in the same incident where he lost half his face, right? So that's his villain origin story. Pretty good villain origin story, but again, just how Batman Commissioner Gordon handle Two Face's crime, and then how the story handles it just doesn't make any sense. Because first, again, the idea that people will commit less crime if they think the district attorney is a good person, and then if they learn he's a bad person, they will start committing crime again, does not make any sense. Okay, it just doesn't make any sense. Does not make any sense. But then the fact that Batman taking the blame, because Batman takes the blame for the deletion of Harvey Dent, even though it was I forget, it was really an accidental self deletion. So Batman didn't do it, right? He takes credit for that, and then also the attack on Commissioner Gordon, his son, and they make it seem like Batman's a fugitive. Well, Batman does become a fugitive, but they make it seem like he did something wrong, and Dent was the hero. The fact that that lie is treated as something heroic makes zero sense. How is lying to the public, especially about something that logically you don't really need to lie about, at least in the grand scheme of things? Like, sure, right, it could hurt, it will hurt Harvey Dent's legacy, but again, who the heck cares about one politician's legacy? Who cares, right? um it's just not heroic. I don't even know where to begin on that one. I don't even know where to begin, because they end with this like ending scene of Batman riding away while getting chased by the cops, and it's like he's not the hero we need, but he's the hero we deserve. And it's like, and you could say, oh, it's subjective. Maybe the movie leaves room for you to think what they did is wrong, but then the whole way it's presented, the emotion they put behind it is like, no, Batman's a good guy for this, and it's like, what? Just it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Like, just tell the public the truth. Hey, the district attorney was actually a crazy deleter. and he tried to delete the police commissioner's son, and then Batman stopped him. And in the process of doing nonsense, he himself passed away. And before that incident, he deleted several people on a revenge quest. Make the documentary about it. Like, just tell people that and move on. And especially in the context of that, because again, like, okay, it's a crazy fantasy scenario, but if you were to make it somewhat realistic, in a city like Gotham that's filled with crime, like people wouldn't. I mean, people would still wake up the next morning. Sure, they'd be like, "Wow, that's crazy," but they would wake up, right? Um, it just honestly, I don't know how I have not heard anyone else bring up this criticism, at least not in a major public way. Like, if you look up Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, you can find a bunch of videos criticizing them, especially The Dark Knight Rises. Even though a lot of people like The Dark Knight Rises, a lot of people are like, all right, this movie has crazy flaws. So I'm like, all right, people were awake for that one. But with The Dark Knight, for some reason, everyone just treats it like it's an untouchable movie. And it's like, I mean, a 2-year old could write a better plot than that. I'm sorry. Like, the character, I mean, what is going on? What is going on? That's mm, mm. So anyway, The Dark Knight is overrated. That doesn't mean it's not a good movie. You can still argue it's a good movie. Doesn't mean it's not enjoyable. It is enjoyable. I enjoy it when I watch it. I've watched it like at least 3 or 4 times, but it's not as good as people say it is. I don't think it's the best superhero movie ever. If it is, that just means people need to step their game up. Really. Okay. That just means people need to step their game up. And I guess in the past, a lot of times when people ask me, I'll be like, "Oh, it's the best superhero movie," but that's probably just because, um, one, even though generally I'm not afraid to say what I think, even if other people disagree. Like any person, to some extent, I don't want to just fight people all the time. So I think up to some extent, I'll just kind of like, all right, let me go with the majority opinion. But then also some of these things I just turn my brain off for. But I don't know. Today I was like, let me turn the brain on. I mean, I've been thinking about this for years, but I was just like, let me just show people what it looks like when your brain's turned on. You're looking at the Dark Knight. But anyway, um, to give one more takeaway from this, if you're writing a superhero story, don't be limited by the Dark Knight, right? If you write something trashy and go, well, it's not better than the Dark Knight, but well, the Dark Knight's so good. No, don't do that. Just go, wow, this is really crap. If the plot is worse than the Dark Knight's plot, then I need to do some soul searching. So write some better stuff. I want to see some better stories. I'm going to try to do that myself in the future. But yeah, the Dark Knight is overrated. Anyway, thanks guys. Please check my about section, and I'll see you next time.